Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Account Abstraction Community Call. I'm going to be your host today. I'm Hudson Jameson. I work at the Ethereum Foundation, doing some community and core developer liaison work, as well as co-founding the Ethereum Cat Herders, who are one of the co-hosts of this call today. Let's go around and I'll call out your name, and then you give me a quick intro about yourself, because we have both people who are part of the account abstraction protocol working team, and some guests today who are going to be contributing with questions and discussion. So let's start with Pooja.
Hey everyone, I'm Pooja Ranjan, the herder-in-chief of Ethereum Cat Herders, a group engaged with the project management and process improvement of the Ethereum ecosystem. I spend most of my time extending support to network upgrade, GitHub repo maintenance, survey, meeting, documenting notes as needed. A significant amount of my time goes into interaction with EIP authors, client developers, different working group, and infrastructure provider of Ethereum community at large. I hope this community call will help people to know more about EIP 2938 and help answer all the questions you have.
Okay, great. Light client.
Hi all, my name is Matt. I usually go by Light Client on the internet. I helped with the AA proposal some on as part of the Quilt team, but Sam and Ansgar are really the people who have been pushing for it the most. I generally just join any open call on the internet that talks about Ethereum and just try and contribute something to that. So I'm playing my typical role here.
All right, awesome. Ansgar.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Ansgar. I'm also part of the Quill team, and so basically Quilt, we are within Consensus, and we do a little bit of basically all things Ethereum protocol related, research-wise, mostly ETH2, but then also lately quite a bit of ETH1, and so account abstraction was just something people were always talking about, and so like half a year ago when we needed a new project, we kind of decided let's have a go. And so basically this new iteration is mainly driven by the Quill team together with Vitalik, of course. So that's mainly us, and yeah, that's why I'm here today.
Excellent. Richard.
Sorry, had to unmute. I'm Richard. I'm working for the Gnosis on the Safe project. So that's why I'm joining the call, because as the Safe is a smart contract wallet, this is in the same area, and I'm interested in the topic since we also want to push it forward that smart contracts become the standard account. And yeah, that's why I'm joining the call.
Great. Angela.
Hi everyone, I'm Angela. I am currently a student at UCLA and also president of blockchain at UCLA.
Annette.
Hi guys, I'm Annette and I'm representing Ethereum Magicians today.
Sam.
Hey, I'm one of the co-authors of the EIP. I'm also with Ansgar and Matt on the Quilt team at Consensus. Yeah, just happy to hear your thoughts today.
All right, Tyler.
Hey, I'm Tyler. I'm a student at Cal State Fullerton, and I'm working with Angela and Matt on helping implement a little bit of AA.
Sweet. Rye.
Hey, I'm a client dev on Besu, and I'll probably have to implement AA sometime soon, so I better understand it. That's why I'm here.
Great. Patrick?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
I missed the start of the conversation. I just had to leave another meeting. What happened?
Oh, we were just doing intros for everybody in the call, just so we all kind of know each other.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, my name. I just put my camera on for a second. Yeah, my name is Patrick McCory. I've done research in cryptocurrencies for about 7 years, and now I'm doing a startup called AnyDAO that basically relays transactions to the network. So account abstraction is really useful for us because then we can spend other people's ETH without having to, worry about how they top up our service.
Great. Patrick's also a great guy to get a beer with. Just FYI, if you're ever in the area with him. All right. Oh snap! We got Carl on the line. Carl, what's up?
Why, hello. I'm Blinded by the Sun. I'm Carl, working on Optimism, and we have implemented a very simple AA, and yeah, big fans of contract wallets.
Awesome. So that's everybody who wants to do an intro. So let's get started here. Could we have, I guess, Ansgar or Sam just introduce AA at a high level, particularly honing in on kind of what difference it can make in the Ethereum ecosystem?
Okay, sure. So basically, I mean, I assume like most people on the call are kind of familiar with the basic idea, but like just to maybe briefly summarize. So right now on Ethereum, you have smart contracts, and that's like the main new thing that Ethereum brought to the blockchain world, and that kind of the nice thing is that these contracts can be like programmed in any arbitrary way you like, but the way to interact with these contracts is through transactions, and transactions still have to basically always be sent from these accounts that have to have like a signature and have to follow this specific format, and so there's no flexibility on the like transaction sending side of things. And so what account abstraction basically aims at is to bring the same flexibility and programmability that we already have with like on the effect side of transactions with contracts, to bring that also to like the sending side of things, to like the transaction validation and all of that. And so like another way of saying that is basically just we want to enable contracts to also send transactions. That's basically what it boils down to. So that under this new thing, we add like a new transaction format, and that transaction format would basically have transactions start at contracts, and then the contract could have whatever code it wants to run to decide if it wants to pay for the transaction or not. And if it doesn't want to pay for the transaction, it's invalid, basically. So that's the high level summary, I would say.
Okay, cool. Oh, do you know what? Did I skip Tyler for the intros? Tyler, did I skip you?
Oh, no, you got me.
Oh, I got you? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I just forgot for a second. Okay, cool. So, I guess with that intro out of the way, do we have any kind of questions or commentary from any of the people who are attending the call today? I want to make sure we have plenty of time for all those kind of questions. Otherwise, I can just ramble and ask questions myself. Okay. So I'll just go ahead and say my experience, like hearing about account abstraction, goes all the way back to like DevCon 2 and DevCon 3, and how I remember hearing about account abstraction is basically Vitalik and a few other people being like, yeah, we're going to do account abstraction and you can pay for Ether with any kind of token you want. And I don't know if that's a different thing than what we're talking about now, just because I haven't looked into account abstraction that much. Is that something where, because you can do different kinds of signatures with account abstraction when you're on an EOA account, once account abstraction happens, does that mean you can like pay for gas with maybe like OMG or another ERC20 token?
So basically, I think it's important to in order to understand this specific EIP that we put out to indeed look at the broader picture. And so account abstraction, you could basically have that in more and more extreme ways. And so the most complete account abstraction that you could imagine is something where the protocol itself wouldn't understand payment for transactions at all anymore, right? And I think that is later on when Carl will talk a little bit about like the optimism side of things. That is something that's interesting enough. You can really like easily recreate in rollups. And in that kind of world, you could have things where you basically pay the miner directly in DAI or in whatever token you want, right? And then it's up to the miner to understand if the value that they get out of the transaction is sufficient for them to include it, right? And there wouldn't be nothing like a gas price or anything, right? Because that all would be completely abstracted away. It turns out that this is really complicated though, because it is very hard to reason about transactions in flight, like how do they behave, under which conditions, what does happen, when does the miner want to see the transaction or not? The intermediary nodes can't really make the distinction, all of these things. And so basically what account abstraction over the years boiled down to more and more was to say, we don't really want to implement this like full account abstraction. We want to basically find a good compromise where you get like most of the benefits, but at the same time, you kind of limit it to like a scope where you can kind of understand what's happening. And so with today's account abstraction, the way we kind of went ahead and specified it, it's kind of like a mix there. Like you still, the interesting, so basically on the base protocol, payment is still done in Ether, right? That doesn't change at all. So for the transactions, the contract would still have to pay in Ether, but because it's now the contract, you can have this mixed situation where the user only has some token. So maybe like, I don't know, I could have a wrapper around DAI even, or it could just be my debt token. It could be, I don't know, Ansgar gold or whatever. And then every user that holds some Ansgar gold, they can just pay the contract in Ansgar gold, and then the contract then goes ahead and pays in Ether. So from the protocol, it looks like, oh, it's still being paid in Ether, and the protocol doesn't have to reason about all these weird things, but the contract could still kind of wrap that, and the user wouldn't. So users wouldn't necessarily have to own any Ether anymore at all. It could all be abstracted away in some tokens or whatever, as long as there's some contract that's willing to convert between the two, if that makes sense.
And you're saying this is what you're working on. It's not the far-fetched thing you were talking about, right?
Yeah, sorry, my audio cut out for a second, but yes, basically
Wonderful.
This is the version. Sorry, give me a second. I have to fix
Sure.
my audio.
No problem. And then so Pooja, you said there were slides, maybe?
So yeah, I mean, if we can get the slides for the usage, we have used it, some of them in one of the episode of Peep and Eep that we did for account abstraction. I found that to be very useful for people who are new and maybe would like to know more about that.
Sure. If y'all want to do the slides, feel free. Just talk about it in chat or let me know. But until they get the slides pulled up, I know there were some questions in chat, and I'm also just interested. From Carl's perspective, what is Optimism doing with AA? How is AA different on a layer 2 than it is a layer 1 platform? And before any of that happens, actually explain what a rollup is, just in case people who are tuning in don't know what a rollup is.
Sure, this is a mighty task you have assigned me here, though.
I believe in you.
Thank you. So a rollup is a layer 2 scalability technology. Essentially what we do is we kind of embed a kind of chain of transactions. We could call it a child chain directly inside of layer 1, aka Ethereum. And so what does that give us? That gives us essentially a okay, I'll just talk about it from the perspective of like the rollup that we are building. So we're building a little thing called Optimistic Ethereum, and it is essentially Ethereum inside of Ethereum. So it has its own, EVM, and it executes very similarly. It's just that if you synchronize the layer 1 chain to synchronize the rollup, you also synchronize the kind of layer 2 chain. And so you're kind of almost running 2 clients right next to each other. And the fun thing about this is that because we have our own little environment, we can make slight tweaks to how the EVM works and how what the structure of the state space is and all that kind of stuff. And one of the most important tweaks is adding account abstraction. And so actually, interestingly enough, the way we implement a dead simple account abstraction, where essentially all we have is we have for every transaction an entry point that is like the target, that is the contract that is going to be executed first. We have call data, and we have a gas limit. And those are the 3 things that you send to a contract. Of course, there's contextual information like the timestamp and the block number, but that's it. And we just assume that the contracts that are being executed on L2 will do things like pay gas to the block producer, and check a signature for EOAs. And I will shout out one fun thing that we do is we actually added an extra opcode. And this opcode is called create EOA. And what that is that what that is for is if you take a signature, an ECDSA signature, and you want to create a contract wallet for the ECDSA address, you can actually use this opcode, create a contract wallet at the address of your like MetaMask wallet. So, on Ethereum, you have like, you're either using a contract wallet or you're using an EOA. But in this case, you can actually use the EOA's address, but have a contract wallet there instead. So anyway, that's a fun one because it upgrades everyone who's using MetaMask to use contract wallets. So anyway.
Maybe briefly follow up there, and because I think the natural question that might come up here is, why is it so much simpler to implement something like account abstraction in a rollup, right? Because I mean, we've spent like months and months to come up with a mainnet compatible version, and then Carl just rolls around and is like, well, we just implement that simple account abstraction on rollups. And so the answer there is mainly, I would put it in like that for rollups, you have what is similar to centralized miners. So you basically have these, I always forget the word for exactly how the entity there is called, that's kind of producing or like moving ahead the chain.
Sequencers?
Sequencers, yeah, that's a good point, yeah. And importantly, I think, at least I would have to come back to Carl there, but I think users basically send transactions to the sequencers directly, as opposed to having like a decentralized mempool in the network. And so that way, like you can basically, as long as you understand what kinds of transactions sequencers like process, right? What kind of token payments they accept and so on, you can get away with this more like full account abstraction that I was mentioning earlier, where you could basically directly pay in any token, all of these things. As long as you know the sequencer supports that specific transaction, you can just send it to the sequencer directly. And then the sequencer, you could have like a naive sequencer that only accepts like Ether and only from like a smart contract with a certain hash or something. Then you can have like a really advanced sequencer that also accepts DAI and has like advanced heuristics for what kind of contracts it supports and all of these things. But why can't you have that on mainnet? Well, on mainnet, we have this decentralized architecture with not only are the miners decentralized, but also the mempools. And so if you want to send a transaction from your computer
so hang on, let me just cut in here for a second, Ansgar.
Yeah,
so I don't know if you were about to do this, but mempool is kind of like a technical term for a collection of all of the transactions that haven't been included on chain that people have created, and this is shared between nodes, and it's kind of this really interesting like place where all of these not even minor nodes get to participate in the network, and it's a huge attack surface. It's a really useful feature. It's part of what makes Ethereum great, and it's what makes account abstraction so difficult on mainnet.
Yeah, exactly. That's like a great summary. So basically, this is like the upside is it makes the whole network decentralized, and for the base layer you need that. I mean, for sequencers, it's not like that's not a compromise that rollups make. You just don't need it for rollups, right? Because you already have the trustlessness of the base layer. You can always rollups usually have like a mechanism where you can skip the sequences and basically force your transaction indirectly via the base chain, and that is important because otherwise you'd have problems with centralization. But on the main base chain, you really need this decentralized world where everyone is basically always talking about, here I like know about this new transaction. Do you maybe also want to transmit it and so on? But that requires like that every node in the network has like a roughly similar understanding of what a valid transaction looks like, right? If one miner supports these kind of transactions, the other miner supports the other ones, that doesn't work because on the base chain, you kind of need to be in agreement about what kinds of transactions get relayed throughout the network. And so it's way more complicated to get account abstraction basically to work on the mainnet. That's why it took us like a long time to get this relatively complex proposal out for base net, like base chain, whereas for rollups, it's simpler. That's maybe for context. I think that's important.
Great. Yeah, that is really interesting context, and I'm really excited about layer 2 stuff, including optimism, and I'm looking forward to working with that because I think as far as timelines go, this is a good time to talk about timelines. Optimism is going to be testnet by Q1, right, Carl? Do we have new timelines or the secret?
They're very top secret. We are currently on a kind of limited test net with, in the current form, because we don't really have enough time to support everything. And then, okay, we're moving very fast. That is all I could say, because otherwise I will get in trouble.
You heard it here first. Carl has confirmed that December 2020 full launch. So that's that. No, I'm joking. Don't get Carl in trouble. So, Account Abstraction team, what about you, the timeline for AA in your mind? Not necessarily for putting it on mainnet, but what's left to do as far as research and development, and then what are the next steps and maybe any roadblocks you're coming up with?
So I think that's actually like a really important kind of conversation to have. So I would say, research-wise, we are relatively confident that we are mostly there. So there are a few things to clean up, a few things to fully spec out. I'm not sure, like most people might be familiar. I do have the presentation maybe at some point later on if we want to briefly jump into that may make sense. So we have this design where we have like a base, the minimal AA, and then we have these extensions that add like more and more functionality. And the base version, I think, is completely specified at this point. The extensions are mostly specified, but they would require a little bit more work. Next step then, if like again, and then the next question is like, what about actual mainnet? But like even just from the development point of view, next step would be to actually implement that in clients. We had like an early version we had implemented, but not the current version. And I think Angela and Tyler were like at least interested to maybe have a look and see if they can help a little bit with that step, the implementation or something in Get, which again we did within like an earlier version. And then maybe have a test net, play around with it, see what the actual implications were. That this is something that definitely would take some time, right? Not only the implementation, but then also spinning up test nets, actually get people interested, get like a little bit of actual real world experience with that. But then of course the main thing is like, what about the core developer process, right? How realistic is it, or like what's the timeline for account abstraction to actually make it to the real world mainnet? And this is of course the big open question. I mean, I could say like just from an optimistic timeline perspective, if like account abstraction would tomorrow become everyone's top priority, which of course it won't, but if it would, then I think first of all there's still the Berlin hard fork that would have to be actually done first, just to get that out of the way. Account abstraction would not be part of that. That is, I'm not sure. I would say probably, I don't know,
late January, early February.
Yes, that sounds like a realistic date. And then I think there are like maybe a couple more EIPs that didn't quite make it into Berlin. So maybe there's like a Berlin part 2 or something shortly after. But then like maybe starting in, I don't know, April or something, people would be free basically. And if they wanted to basically take account abstraction as the big next thing to do. And then I think it would from there on maybe take, I don't know, 6 to 12 months to actually arrive on mainnet. I think that is like a realistic expectation. But then again, of course, the main uncertainty is just about, is it a priority? And I don't think it's right now, at least. I don't think it's like the biggest priority. I think there are other ones as well. And then of course, just do people want it at all? I'm reasonably optimistic that if at some point there's just like nothing else to do, I think account abstraction is definitely something that like, if it doesn't crowd out other things, people would be happy to do it. So I definitely think as soon as like we have some free time, it'll arrive. It just is like, I think we just have to be aware of like, what are the other big things currently ongoing? And I would mainly mention like there's 1559, of course, which I think people would, if it's ready by then, would like prioritize over account abstraction. There is statelessness, which again is probably like, is definitely like more important because other things also depend on that. And then there's just like all the ETH2 activities. So there's the ETH1, ETH2 merge, which we as Quill team also are a little bit involved in working on that, which also, as soon as that's relevant timeline wise, would have higher priority. And then there's of course just like sharding and all of these things. So just what I'm saying is just we need like basically like a 6 to 12 month block of mostly like free priority within the core developers. And at that point, I'm pretty optimistic we could move ahead with that. That was a very long answer, but I think that's like
no, that was good. Sam, what are do you have any additional thoughts on that, or does that kind of echo what the Quilt team kind of thinks?
So on the timeline of account abstraction, I would have to say, I think I'm a little bit more pessimistic. I think it's a little bit further out. I think there's going to be a lot of testing, and it's going to be a while for that to get finished. But I still see it as making it to mainnet as long as people find it useful.
Cool, cool. Okay, let me see if there's any new messages. Okay, do we have questions from any of the people who are joining us today on the call, maybe about their specific projects and how it can interact with it? If there's because I know we had people like Rye from client dev teams. I know we had Patrick from AnySender and stuff like that. And does anybody have anything for the team?
I have one question, about this particular proposal. My understanding is even if it is not on the Ethereum mainnet, it can be used by many of the projects. So is that correct? And how does that work?
Yeah, so basically, I think then we're a little bit, again, with the topic of rollups, because this is like I think the main place, or the main alternative. I think I wouldn't be too sad actually if it turned out to that just like at least for the next year or two or something, there's just not a priority for mainnet, and like the rollups just are the first places to actually adopt account abstraction. I think that would be fine. I do think that like the work that we specifically did in this version of account abstraction is also helpful in the rollup context. And actually, like Carl and we like just recently discussed that we should probably jump on a call, and I think we should do that soon, just to figure out the details there. Just because while you could do like a more full account abstraction in rollups, there are like a few asterisks there actually. So the main one is like these oh, I forgot the name again. What's this? Not sequence? Is it sequencer? Whatever. The sequencers, in order to accept transactions, they still have to understand that they're getting paid. And so I think the most naive initial implementation that the team, the Optimism team is planning is just to say they're only accepting transactions to like one exact smart contract that they know the hash of. And of course, this is exactly back to the mainnet situation of only supporting EOAs. Just instead of an EOA, you have like a smart contract wallet that equals an EOA basically. And so you're just exactly back in the same situation with that you were before. And then it would be up to sequencers to understand other types of transactions. But what we looked into for most of our time is how can you design the base layer or like just the execution environment to make it as easy as simple as possible to reason about transactions. And so I think there's like a decent case to be made that rollups like Optimism should also adopt these more restrictive rules in order to make it easier for transactions to signal to sequencers. Here, this is why you'll definitely get paid in this way if you accept me basically. And so I still think that there are like lessons to be applied basically.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, that's a really interesting take. Going back just a little bit, I actually had a thought because we were talking about timelines, and I'm currently the organizer of the core developer meetings, and I've been kind of seeing where a lot of the talk for future priorities are going, and I know account abstraction is definitely in the top 5 in my opinion of major things. I don't even know if we have 5 total, but the only ones I can think of are 1559 and this, and then the BLS curve stuff going in. And there's going to be some fighting for other, different cryptographic signatures and curves in the future going into precompiles or stuff like that, like EVM 384. So that might be another one. But I can definitely see by next summer this becoming a priority, if not earlier in some regards for the review and like the core devs kind of giving feedback stage. So that's definitely something that I think is an encouraging development to see you guys on the core dev calls taking questions and stuff like that. I think that's really good. And I think that something else. Oh yeah, go ahead.
Just to add a point, this proposal EIP 2938 is already in CFI, like consider for inclusion. Mm-hmm. So they have actually started with the process of being considered for a proposal to be on the mainnet.
Absolutely, that's a really good point, and that's one of the network upgrade policies that we've have in place to kind of go through this call. What's it? Something for inclusion. Why am I forgetting what it's called? Considered for inclusion. Yeah. I helped draft that. I don't know why I forgot it. Considered for inclusion, and yeah, it's cool that it's actually the process is working out. We're trying to improve processes at the core dev calls currently. So a question I had, and then I think we have some questions from the audience too. But a question I had real quick was, I'm trying to think of how this would apply to like an average person, someone who is like joining Ethereum and wants to use this feature. And so to me, it's like, I think I could take my EOA account and convert it to an account abstraction account and make it into a multi-sig, or make it into something where I can pay for other people's gas. That's like my most dumbed down, simple version of what I think about all this stuff. How close am I?
You're not too far off. So account abstraction on its own doesn't get you there, because you can't convert your EOA into an AA contract. But you can do something similar if you add in some of the beyond AA EIPs that we've been throwing around. One of which is these sponsored transactions EIP 3074. So you could deploy a new smart contract wallet, which would be an AA contract, and then it could assume your identity using this precompile, and then transact as your EOA if you want to set it up that way.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I was
so
on mute. Go ahead.
basically, I would say the hope would be to, like, going forward, establish contracts more and more as like the native, like, core unit on the Ethereum blockchain, and EOAs more as like the legacy type, but just like to realistically have like some path of adoption there. So there's these kind of things like sponsor transactions that kind of give you backward compatibility with the users that already have EOAs and tied to their identity, basically. I think those are really important. But like going forward, the hope would be to more and more, I think, of course, like Richard and like the Gnosis people, all these smart contract developers out there, like can talk about how like it's a slow and long road to like bring more and more people into smart contract wallets, but hopefully that would like make this easier and just one.
So I could like generate an account and make an account abstraction wallet, or account abstraction style wallet. If I wanted to then destroy that contract and generate a new one, do I need a whole new account so it's like a permanent contract?
So I think that these things depend heavily on the details. So if you want basically upgradability, you can also just have one smart contract, and then you basically call out into libraries for the specifics, and you just switch out the libraries if you want to. But of course, you could also, if you just basically want to have a whole new account, or like, right, and then you can also just choose to deploy a whole new smart contract wallet, and have that be on your new main identity, basically.
Okay, that makes sense. Patrick, did you have a question? Because you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I didn't realize I unmuted myself. Sorry.
Oh, no problem. Alita, you have a question if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So, quick question. I see account abstraction as kind of like a wrapper of the Ethereum network. Is that like or like, I guess based off of that, then you see a lot of companies, for example, Reddit or Facebook, that are kind of doing their own cryptocurrency. Is this something via account abstraction that could like help, for example, that sort of application where they're just basically makes creating your own, like flavored or wrapped cryptocurrency easier?
What it could definitely help with is the sponsored part of it. So Reddit's cryptocurrency, they don't want their users having to purchase ETH to be able to send their community tokens or whatever they were called around. So account abstraction would let Reddit handle the on-chain fees for doing these transactions, and that way it makes it a little bit easier for them to make these cryptocurrencies.
Okay.
I think that's really cool, because I think, if you make it easier for companies to sort of market, even just as a fun thing, like the cryptocurrency in general, then I think that'll like improve and increase potentially like adoption in the general community.
Sam, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I heard earlier, and I wasn't sure who, that we had at least one client dev on here, so I had a question for you. how hard is it to make like an opcode into a state checkpoint? So for example, when you call from one contract into another, if the callee reverts, the caller does not, and that lets you do some like error handling and checks and stuff. We want to make the paygas opcode make a similar kind of checkpoint, and we've noticed that that's not too hard to do in Geth. How hard is it to do in other clients?
I'll be honest, I have not done much of the EVM contract execution code, but I can definitely get back to you on that.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay.
One assumption, that's the same behavior as any internal call, like call, delegate call, or static call, right? So this should be kind of a natural behavior for all EVM implementations to be able to add something like this, because it needs to be available already for these three opcodes anyways.
Okay, cool. That's kind of what our intuition was, but I wanted to make sure.
Angela, did you have a question? I saw your hand was raised.
Yeah, actually, I know like one of the like main goals of this EIP is to make it so that like users don't have to like trust or like rely on extra protocols for privacy, like Tornado Cash. So I was like wondering if you could talk more about like what AA can bring for like privacy and like relayers.
Sure. So I think that's like a really good point. So basically, what account abstraction in a lot of use cases does is it just gets rid of the relayer necessity, because you can just go as a user, you can just go to the smart contract directly. And for most use cases, this is not that important, because using relayers doesn't add that much of like an extra step, although of course it's always nicer. But like there's one really important thing they just pointed out of privacy, and of course for most applications today on Ethereum, that is not that big a thing, because it's already tied to your Ethereum identity. Like you can look at like the address behind it basically. But something like Tornado Cash, I think, is a great example, because that's exactly that you don't want to reveal where the withdrawal comes from, and you ideally also don't want that the relayer knows the IP address of the person that sent the request, or all of these kind of things. I personally had the intuition that over time more and more of Ethereum will move towards these more like privacy-based solutions, basically wrapping things inside of zero-knowledge proofs. And in that world, I think it will become more and more important actually for users to kind of have an easy way to kind of not be identifiable, trackable, and all of these things. And I think in that context, this is really like another of these advantages. Of course, if you want to interact with the base chain, that also you also have to like actually have some connection out. So there's still some point that at which you could be identified. But I think there are other solutions that try to also get rid of that. So like I don't know. I personally I know of like the Hopper team that try to implement like some Tor-like system for Ethereum nodes. So you can send transactions without revealing anything about your identity, and like those in combination with account abstraction, that would be really powerful, I think.
Okay. Yeah, Tornado Cash is definitely gaining in popularity, so having more privacy around protocols like that is going to be really, really interesting. Thanks for the question. Did you have, I said this earlier and then I just blanked and I didn't do anything with it. Did you have a presentation of some kind, Ansgar or Sam, that you wanted to go over, or would you rather just take questions? This is kind of your call.
So we do have a presentation. We have like basically like a core presentation that we have several different versions of, because we gave a couple presentations over the last few weeks, and I think the most relevant one was the PEEP and EIP session that we recently had. I'm not sure though if it makes sense. So I do have them open right now, just like as a reference in case there's anything specific to reference. I'm not sure like. Because it'll take quite some time to go through it like fully.
Sure. So what I'm thinking is we'll just direct everyone to PEEP and EIP. Does that sound good? So if you're tuning in and you want to get more of a deep dive into the basics, is that kind of what PEEP and EIP would provide?
Yeah, I think actually PEEP and EIP was the best single best place to go to in that case. That's and I think there will be like a part 2 of the PPNeep because we actually ran over time, and so but
Nice.
the basics, I think the basics were fully covered. So
Awesome. All right. Light Client, I think you had a question, right?
Yeah, we were talking about how we believe that account abstraction can provide a lot of benefits for abstracting this concept of a relayer from the user and having them interact more directly with the chain. And we believe that's beneficial for these privacy related applications. But we do have 2 people who are leading teams in this relay space. And I didn't know if they wanted to weigh on what their thoughts were in terms of, relayers being able to kind of see the transactions that are coming in and the differences between the privacy of that and just, interacting with the Ethereum network directly.
I could weigh in a bit, I guess. I guess why AA is relevant for something like AnyDAO where so I mean, before I go into that, so just for everyone's clear what AnyDAO does, the idea is that we take a transaction, like a meta transaction, we pack it in an Ethereum transaction, we send it to the network, and we gradually bump the fee until it gets in. So the idea is that it's this reliable, transaction delivery service.
So a meta transaction is a transaction on behalf of a different user, or?
Yes. So, So the idea of a meta transaction is that, I guess the way to think about it is that how do you authenticate yourself to a smart contract? Most smart contracts, rely on message.sender. So if we take the user's transaction and we send it, then we're going to be the message.sender and not the user. So a meta transaction is really just to get around that awkwardness of message.sender. So there's 2 ways to implement it. Either the target contract can verify a signed message. So the meta transaction is as a signed message from the user. We take their signed message, we send it, and then the smart contract can verify the signed message, get the signage address, and use that instead of message.sender. Or they can have a wallet contract, which is basically doing the same thing, and then it'll doc call out to the target contract. So you either have a wallet contract or you modify the target contract. So account abstraction is more to do with, for us, around the wallet contract approach in terms of solving that problem. But I guess for the relayer, for account abstraction, what account abstraction is really solving is how the user pays for the transaction for us. So right now, the user has a pre-deposit ETH in our service, and then we're willing to relay transactions in their behalf. With account abstraction, they could deploy a special wallet contract that will then pay the transaction fee instead of us. So they don't actually have to pre-deposit the ETH of us. They just deploy their wallet contract. They put ETH in their wallet contract. Then they can ping our API. We can validate it and say, oh yeah, we can spend their ETH, and then we can just send the transaction in their behalf. So for account abstraction, the problem that's really solving for us is the pre-deposit of ETH. The message.sender problem, account abstraction and wallet contracts do solve that, but it's very difficult to convince people to deploy wallet contracts. That's been our experience so far. So what would really help a relay service is a general message.sender solution, like the new opcode that you proposed, where you call into an opcode and it actually changes the signer to the message.sender. Yeah, so I guess that's our thoughts at the moment, if that helps.
Yeah, that was helpful. Thanks, Patrick.
All right. Do we have other commentary from anybody? Any questions, things like that? If not, I have something I wanted to bring up. There's a document that Sam wrote about, I think it's called EIP 2938 Account Abstraction Explained. And they give a really good brief overview of 2938. And they mention in it, let me see if I can find it. There's a lot of talking about the nonce and how basically this opens up, here it is, the fact that the transaction pool logic, the existing transaction pool logic combined with AA's arbitrary transaction validity opens a new type of attack on the Ethereum network. where a single transaction is included in a mined block that can invalidate a large number of previously valid pending transactions. So reading it just really quickly, it seemed like the solution was you take the highest value transaction, and that's the canonical transaction, and the rest of them are discarded. Did I get that right, or at all? Probably not, but I want to hear what's
Sort of.
going on.
Sure. So normal transactions can only be invalidated with a very limited set of conditions. So if the account's nonce changes, the signature is invalid, or the account's balance drops below the value of the transaction. So those are the three cases that a traditional non-AA transaction can be invalidated. AA transactions, on the other hand, can be invalidated by any change at all to the AA contract state. So you could have, like, let's say 300 different AA accounts, and each one of those accounts has a bunch of pending transactions. So I'm just setting up what the attack would look like. So you have all these pending transactions in the mempool, all touching different AA contracts. Each one of those contracts has an if statement in them that says, if this, the value at storage slot 0 is true, I am now invalid and I will never pay. So you have all of these like ticking time bomb transactions in the mempool, and then the attacker sends a single transaction on chain with a very low gas fee, basically just an S store that writes into each of these contracts, setting storage slot 0 to true, invalidating all of these mempool transactions, wiping the mempool. So this is kind of an example of how this kind of ratio thing works. So yeah, that's the attack. That's the whole thing. And basically, you propagate this stuff, all these nodes do all this work validating these transactions, and then they're invalidated by a very cheap transaction on chain. And that's a huge problem for the mempool. They can crowd out legitimate transactions. Yeah.
Got it. So how does it solved?
Sure. So all of the rules that we propose, so the contracts can only AA contracts can only read from their own state. They can't call out. You can't read environment opcodes. There's basically all of these mempool restrictions. They're all there to protect against these mempool wipe attacks.
Okay.
So basically, just like the idea is really just you want the same situation for AA contracts that you have for normal transactions. Only transactions from the same contract, once they are included, can basically invalidate the others. So basically, you can keep a list like these are the 10 pending transactions to the contract here, and only if one of those gets included on chain, then the other 9 have to be reevaluated. While unless that happens, you can basically you can rest assured that you validated them before, and they'll remain valid. There are a little few asterisks there, but that's the general idea basically.
Okay, thanks for the explanation. It looks like Richard can jump in and respond to an earlier question. I don't know where to scroll up and get the question, so if someone could repeat that. Was it Light Client's question?
Yeah, so the question was, right, how would this work together with the Gnosis Safe, as the Gnosis Safe being a smart contract-based multi-signature wallet? And how would it benefit, and how would the Gnosis Safe use it? So in general, right, so when we started developing the Gnosis Safe, originally we started with mobile, and also having mobile, we collect the signature off-chain. We don't want that all of the owners have to hold key, because if you imagine a setup where you're a team that manages fund together, if any member of this team has to have some ETH on their account just to execute a transaction via this, or confirm a transaction on this shared account, this would be kind of a hassle. And right now what we have to do is basically similar to any.sender. We have something like for the Gnosis relay, right? We also talk to all the different people like any.sender and GSN and Rocksite, because the Gnosis Safe theoretically allows it already to do most of the stuff off-chain, but obviously there is this overhead of what also Sam just described, right? Like if you have a relayer, they also have this nonce problem. You also, if you go against the account, it has this nonce there. A lot of these things, the hope would be that we don't have to write them into our contract to some extent, and they would be a little bit more native so that the relayer is not involved anymore. Still, the safe contract would still do the multi-signature part and do all this logic. I think the first version of the account abstraction, even though it's very interesting, it's not where it would be super useful for the safe in its current form, because the safe has like some advanced logic where it allows something we call modules, which is basically you can register any other address which can go around your logic, but so that you can on-chain use other logic or recovery logic that can then give you back access, which with the current approach where you have one entry point and only this entry point is allowed to trigger state changes through this account might be a little bit conflicting. But probably this will not be forever like this, and it will change, so it's fine. And I would still love to see the first version and even write a safe that doesn't have the module functionality to even just showcase how it works. And I think the other thing which would be really cool, which is currently just a blocker, is still that there is this opcode which basically in the end pays the gas opcode. Right now it's required that your deployed contract actually calls this, like your AA contract calls this. Actually, the safe uses a proxy implementation setup. So we have a proxy which has minimal code and then forwards all of the logic execution to an implementation contract, or pulls the code from this contract. Obviously, the coolest would be if we could just point to a new version of the safe that has suddenly this nice account abstraction logic with pay gas, but that would mean that actually the pay gas opcode would be in the implementation code. So this would be the very long vision where it would be for us, where we would see it when account abstraction is fully supported, that we just release a new version of the Gnosis safe and magically everybody who used the Gnosis safe suddenly can also use account abstraction. So this is how we would imagine it. But I know it's a long way, and there's also smaller steps that already would know that we talked about like there's also this EIP for making contracts indestructible, which would be already a big step towards this, because right now you can self-destruct accounts, which has kind of a lot of issues, which when suddenly a contract disappears that you base some logic on. And also this would already be in this proxy implementation version, be a very huge step to get support for this. And this is where definitely we would also love to help push this forward.
And just to briefly to talk about like these different kind of stages for account abstraction. So again, what we have in our EIP is like a minimal version that we call single tenant, because it's mainly just useful for like a single user. But even there, it has like additional restrictions. And then we have some extensions that would bring that to what we call single tenant plus. And then we have as like the fullest version for us is like multi-tenant. And the idea would not be to just bring single tenant first to the main base chain and then iterate from there. The hope would be to just basically directly have at least all the protocol changes in place by the time we move to account abstraction to basically already go to the fullest version. It's more, I would understand it as more like a way of reasoning about the safety of the system, where basically like this, we can very simply reason about the safety of the minimal version, and then we basically argue for every individual extension why this is also safe to do. And if anyone has like problems with one specific extension, we could just not do this one, or at least not initially do this one. So I would hope that there's not like a long period in which we would stay at like the account abstraction light, but immediately like go to the more advanced one. Although there are some features, for example, this like pay gas in delegate call targets, or even some other things like some more advanced features you might want to have for like some advanced DeFi arbitrage use cases or something. Some of those that not even like our fullest version supports, because they're just really tricky to do. And maybe we'll add some of them over time before it gets included, because we figure out how to do them safely. But those of course are still like, it's unclear if we can find a way for those.
Thanks for that discussion. Shout out to Gnosis Safe. That is the official place that the Cat Herders keeps all their goodies that are worth any value, meaning Ether and DAI. So thank you for building that product. It looks like Sam is saying, when do we want to schedule the next call? Do you mean the community call, Sam?
I do.
Pooja, what do you think of that? When should we do another one of these?
I think first we should try to get the P-Penny part 2 first, and then maybe after a month or two, giving them some break to get more updates on that or collect more questions from the community, we can plan another community call on account abstraction.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Yeah, and I think for a future call, what I'd really like to be interested in, there were some great people who came on today, like Optimism and AnySender and Gnosis Safe, but having more wallets and exchanges and miners and stuff who can really dive into what the implications of all this would be, I think would be really valuable if we can get some of those type of people on.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so we can definitely try to do that. So we only have a few minutes left. So in these final seconds, or these final minutes, I should say, Sam and Ansgar, if I'm a dApp developer, if I'm a miner, if I'm an infrastructure provider like Etherscan or Infura, what kind of feedback do you want, and where do I put that feedback? Where should I reach out to you all?
Sure. So one of the big questions is how badly is this going to affect your downstream tooling? If you're Etherscan, if you're any other kind of blockchain explorer, we want to know, what we can do to minimize the work for you. And we have some questions about that transaction hash uniqueness that we need to get to, but that's kind of a later topic.
Cool. And where can they drop off any feedback? There's like a Discord channel, I think, in the ETH-R&D Discord, right?
There is, and that's probably the best place to reach us. You can also there's also a discussion topic on Ethereum Magicians, which is linked to from the EIP. So if you can't find anything else, you can always find us there.
And more information about this EIP and account abstraction in general is going to be in the Medium post that the Cat Herders put out to announce this call. There's some really good links in there that I'd encourage people to look at if you want some more deeper insight into this EIP and this whole initiative here. Anybody on the call, any final words? We got about 2 minutes left. Otherwise, we'll just wrap this one on up and get going with our, is it Friday? Oh God, it's Friday. Yes. Anybody have final words?
Yeah, I would sincerely like to thank everyone to join today, because this is the first time that we are organizing any community call for any of the proposal. But we hope to see more community calls coming up, talking to authors, talking to people. As Hudson mentioned, that we should be inviting more infrastructure provider to take their questions. So thanks to the authors, of course, and people to join. I'm sorry, I feel, did I interrupt Light Client? You're saying something?
Oh, I just wanted to say one quick thing. I thought this was probably relevant given, the scale of the change that AA is. But from the AMA that was hosted by the EF research team the other day, Vitalik had a comment where he basically said that over the next 2 years, there's going to be substantial changes to the Ethereum protocol. And to me, I feel like that just means it's such a perfect time to try and have these major changes go through, because we're already going to be doing a lot of huge changes. 1559 is going to be a major change. It's going to require significant changes to the mempool. And with all of this work going in, it is a good time for people interested in AA and people who want to make that happen to start contributing. And we can try and bundle these things together so we can make the Ethereum protocol a lot better.
Yeah, I guess the one final comment to say that hopefully it does get through, because it'll simplify a lot of the architecture for relayers. So anyone can really be a relayer without much setup.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for the final comments. We have hit time. Thank you so much, Sam, Ansgar, and everyone who joined on the call. This has been great. I think I learned a lot, and I can't always say that about every EIP, especially one this dense, so you all did a great job of explaining it. Thank you all so much. Everyone have a great weekend, and we'll see everybody who tuned in on the stream for the next community call. Bye, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Hudson.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Hudson.